Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show, Extreme 80s, or Kicking It. It's a kind of a combo show tonight. I'm your host, Rob. With me is the real Dr. V. Good evening, sir.
Evening.
I am broadcasting, as always, from the Pine Hills Palace just west of Orlando, Florida. And I got to tell you, Doctor, with all the stuff that's going on in the world today, all the protests, all the riots, all the burgeoning cities that don't know about negative versus positive rights in the legal libertarian sense and everything else that people want to argue about. I sat down to watch a movie that legitimately I had never seen before in my life or watched. And it was one of those ones I just happened to miss. And it's a movie we're going to be discussing this evening. And it's 1987's He-Man, or really Masters of the Universe, with Dolph Lundgren and Frank Langella. So, Doctor, I kind of want to go first because I wrote down a quote from the movie that I think summarizes my feelings towards you and the team from I Love Comics about how I feel with this movie. And Skeletor and the final battle at the end, and I quote by Frank Langella, it's, "I ache to smash you out of existence." Or as Frank Langella would have said, "I ache to smash you out of existence." So that's where I want to start, Doctor, because, wow, He-Man. I want to talk about him first because Jaws, as we talked about on Top 10 Tuesdays, with also from Team from I Love Comics and yourself on Top 10 Tuesdays, which we'll be doing 1976 tonight, right after this stream. We talked about how Jaws is one of the top two movies, and that was a mega hit. But of course, Star Wars is a movie that was popular in the mid to late 70s that really launched the entire dolls and toys kind of merchandise sort of thing that you can make mad fat money with it. And so some people tried doing it and created this really derivative character that meant absolutely nothing called He-Man. And it was sort of kind of successful. So thankfully, Canon Films, which we love here on the Extreme Movie Show, especially on Kicking It with the action films, decided to make a movie. So this is another Canon classic. And I got to tell you, this movie, if you watch it without knowing anything about it, it's horrible. I joke when we talk about Boys on Buffy with Professor Pixel and Dalton on Sunday nights. We are, of course, the Boys on Buffy, about how the fight scenes just are really awful, but we know Buffy's kind of cheesy and that's okay. But I've never seen a movie in my life literally that had worse fight scenes than this movie, He-Man. And that's okay, because if you're like a 6-year-old kid, 10-year-old kid watching this film, it works. And so there's a certain kid friendliness to this film that as a teenager and adult you watch and go, man, this sucks. But that being said, there's a lot to like and discuss about this film. So I can't wait to get into some of the specifics. So you tell me, Doctor, what was your initial impressions about this flick?
Like I said, this movie, I had never seen the cartoon series, which is loosely based off of. I felt that it was stretched out way longer than it should have been. Yep. Though it's supposed to be about, it's called Masters of the Universe, but it's basically about a girl who is like basically wrapped up in the middle of a war between, He-Man and Skeletor. And the whole movie is like He-Man's not really much of a man. He's pretty much like the Skeletor's bitch.
Well, let's just be blunt. Dolph Lundgren as He-Man. He had only did the role in, I think, Rocky at this point. He had been like a bodyguard. And look, in all honesty, no homo, is the old expression or whatever like that. As a heterosexual, happily married man, I can sit there and say to you today that Dolph Lundgren's, man, he's really juicy in this flick. He's real beefy, and that's what he's there for. It was really his first big role in something. So actually, the writers and directors chose to, despite that natural genetic lottery that Dolph hit, because he's a super, super smart guy. He really is. We're fans of him. Yep. They wrote really everything around this movie about Skeletor, which we'll talk about him in a moment. So I agree with you. He-Man's not really front and center at all in this film.
No, and he should have been. That is also why this movie flopped. It didn't even hit the budget of $22 million like it was supposed to be. The box office came over like $17 million.
Yep.
So it was commercial flop. My number one complaint with this movie is the fact, you did not get to see He-Man as much as you wanted to. He-Man's supposed to be the guy who's like Skeletor's greatest enemy, and here we see basically right in the middle of the story where Skeletor is already winning. It's like what? Mm-hmm. Where's the beginning of this movie?
A lot of people, I think, initially that are fans of movies from the 80s and have seen a lot of them would probably go, hey, this has a real big Conan the Barbarian vibe to it. And I can see that a little bit. And actually, one or two scenes, for some reason, walking around the quote unquote downtown part reminding me a little bit the way it was shot of Halloween 2, but that's just because I'm a John Carpenter mark. But in all honesty, I think the big ripoff was Flash Gordon and with all the lasers. And I got to say, in any movie that I've seen, including the Naked Gun movies, The Files from Police Squad, I have never seen so much bullets, lasers, shootouts, whatever you want to call them, going on, and not one of them hitting. I mean, it was just a big misfest. Yeah, it's. Let's talk about the cast, because that's really what the meat and potatoes of the movie is.
They had a good cast.
The cast is great. Yes.
Yeah. I believe this is Courtney Cox is actually her first film.
Correct. She was the girl in the Bruce Springsteen video. I forget which song it is, and that's how she was known. So she was on her way of breaking through and stuff. So she ended up going in as the all-American girl, and that's what got her the role. So I will say this: they intentionally, other than He-Man looking like an action character, they really didn't have a layer of sexuality at all to this film. And I think they intentionally tried to hit that. And they did that with Courtney Cox looking playing Jane, but I will say she looks very natural on film, unlike the guy that allegedly was her boyfriend and musician, who I got to say, the only thing interesting about him is that if you're a musician or a guitarist, like I'm a hobbyist as a guitarist, your guitar magazines, your music mags in the 80s that you'd live to get every month, because they'd have 2 or 3 guitar tabs written in them. They always had the big ad for, like Berklee College of Music, some other place, and then, of course, something for how to have perfect pitch, which, of course, doesn't exist. You're either born with it or you don't. Chevy Chase has it, by the way.
Yeah.
But I thought this guy, hopefully he's not going to be a part of the movie. He was. However, another member of the cast, I got to ask you this, Doctor. You're in Back to the Future as Mr. Strickland, one of the biggest movies of the 80s, a fantastic movie, one of the greatest movies of all time, just a lot of fun. And you're like, man, what's next? And it's like, you're going to be in a Canon Classic and you're going to be a shotgun. I'm like, okay, I'm buying it. But the more screen time he had, especially with that sweet leather jacket he had, man, I was expecting good things. And I was pleasantly rewarded at the end when he got to stay with a castle and a babe. All right, so what else about the movie? I'm saving Skeletor for the end. What else did you want to bring up about it? Doctor? I can't seem to hear the doctor for some reason.
Boyfriend or...
Go ahead, Doctor. Can't hear you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just saying that you had a Courtney Cox in there. She's in there, and she's the key to basically saving everybody. Her and this guy Charlie, like basically, they fixed this little device that I think I can't remember what his name was. The little runt's name is, but like yeah. So he's like, well, I know how to play keyboard. He hooks up his keyboard to it, and he starts playing the notes. And he's like, oh yeah, it opens up a portal. He also got John Cypher as Man at Arms. I don't know if I've ever seen. I don't know what else he's been in, but he was okay. Like I said, like to me at this point, he was a nobody actor to me. He may have been something more popular in the 70s. Maybe he was on a drama or something or soap opera.
Right.
But the movie, like I said, the movie wasn't as great. I mean, I think a lot of more people would say like, oh yeah, the movie's fantastic, and it's like but then have they really gone back and watched it? Because I don't think this movie really holds up to what might have been awesome when it first came out. Because I remember I watched it probably when I was like 15, 16. I was probably in the late 90s,
Right.
I mean, and I was just like, okay, I'll watch this, and I'm thinking like Courtney Cox is hot in here, like she's but then she takes a blaster shot to the leg, and then she's less hot because now you have to carry around. It's just. I don't know what else to say about this movie. There wasn't my only. I guess the favorite part you get is when He-Man actually starts becoming He-Man. He breaks the bonds, and he actually he's like, I have the power. And Skeletor's like, oh crap. But
yeah, I kind of actually popped for that scene. I have to admit, I totally kind of forgot about it when Dolph did it. I was like, great, he nailed it, because it was interesting. I was watching some of the behind the scenes of the making of this, and that was the concern, was Dolph Lundgren's really thick accent. And apparently, depending on, I guess, how contracts are written in Hollywood and stuff, he only got to have a few chances at each lines. And apparently this movie was something that was completely getting shut down and restarted and rebooted. They didn't have money. So it's very uneven that way. And so when you consider all the difficulties they had in actually getting a completed film done, I will give them credit for that.
Right.
Yeah, I thought the score was really good. The music, it just really stood out to me watching it. Maybe because it was a little bit louder, or maybe that was just the version that I saw. But I think with He-Man, one of the things lost on people, unless they grew up in the '80s, was the device that you're talking about. Basically, it's like a giant dildo, but I mean, they called it some little thingy, and it had some magic power. Who cares? And they kept arguing whether it was Russian or Japanese, because Japan manufacturing was considered high quality back in the day. After they got nuked and got rebuilt, they really pushed out things too. Now, of course, all the cheap stuff comes from China and the quality's not good. But yeah, in the '80s, that was the thing. So I kind of popped for that. And like you said, at the final battle, apparently they shut the film down before they could even film it. So up to the, I've got the power, and he holds the sword up and all that. And then Skeletor was like, oh crap. Then they had literally like one day to go back and film a few things, and that's why they're backlit, because they couldn't show anything. It was just those two. So I got to say, it is a little bit of a long film, but it kind of goes quick, and it is an '80s film. It definitely feels like it. It really, really does. I don't know how you felt about that, but for me, I watched it going, yeah, this is complete '80s. If somebody wanted to watch an '80s film, or a little kid wanted to watch it, it's not a bad film for that. And so I think sometimes knowing who your audience is works, and that's what I think they made this film for.
Like you said, this movie was probably made for about like 6-year-olds through age 10. Because age 10, you're kind of like, this is kind of dumb. It's like I guess, was it true back then? Where you see a lot of people who were like really big He-Man fans? Because like I'm thinking that's what you're liking, and compared to what else was out, I would have been like, He-Man sucks. I would want to watch Transformers and watch Ghostbusters, man.
Well, I think the interesting thing about the '80s is that, we were talking about, films of the '70s right now going into the '80s, and one of the themes is that the '80s we consider to be the greatest decade in terms of pop culture, because there was such a mix of fantastic music, and there was a sense of positivity that you can do stuff, and an enthusiasm. And I think people really were interested in just working hard at doing whatever it is they wanted to do. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's a fantastic interview when he talks about, always picturing wanting to be a movie star and wanting to be successful in real estate and weightlifting, all those things. And so like I say, Jaws was huge, but Star Wars was the switch. Once that got flipped, man, I'm telling you, we got a couple cable channels. You've got a little bit more production in terms of number of films and shows. We started getting stuff, animated stuff, not just, of course, He-Man, but all sorts of other things in the '80s. That was a thing. So people were really, really excited to get emotionally attached, invested into something that they connected with, and share it with each other. And that was one of the fun things about the '80s, is that you could go into a record store and you could argue about Rush versus Led Zeppelin versus this versus that. And everybody still, at the end of the day, whether you like what they liked or not, you came away feeling like, okay, that's kind of cool. I learned something about it. And the intensity of the attraction emotionally that people had towards things, even cartoons like He-Man, which people argue wasn't a very good cartoon, and the movie wasn't that good either. It was still He-Man, and it was their jam. It was their thing. So, yeah, and let's be honest, everything we've talked about the film might make people go, nah. The saving grace to this film, and it's this actor's favorite role, as he said many times, is Frank Langella, who was notorious for playing Dracula back in the '70s. He was fantastic in it. He scared the crap out of me when I saw that. It's a great film, which I can't wait for us to actually cover later on the Extreme Movie Show. But the guy's makeup, the way he delivers his lines, holy crap, he is so good in this as Skeletor. The way he walks, talks, moves, sneers, looks, everything about him is fantastic, and it's very creepy in a way. And he's so good; it magnifies how generic everything else is in a film to me. And I don't mean that as an insult, but he is on a totally other level to me in here, other than Meg Foster's eyes, of course, because I figured we'd probably mention her. But Frank Langella, give it to me, Doctor. What'd you think?
Frank Langella, basically, I was reading up on him, and basically, the guy was excited to get this role because his son was like a big He-Man fan. So they like, and I can only imagine being a parent, like you're the kid, like, I have the power, for the kid all the time. He's like, finally, I get to be the villain, and just like, haha. Because when they asked him for the role, he's like, dude, I was like, definitely, I want the role.
Where do I sign up?
Right?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
Frank Langella. We had covered a movie a while ago on the Extreme Movie Show when we started to launch the horror version of what we do on that, and that was, of course, The Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp. And if Johnny Depp plays this book detective who's a real sleazy, slime bad guy, it's one of Johnny Depp's best roles. He's fantastic in it. Love the movie a lot. And then, of course, Frank Langella plays the guy who hires him, who later in the film, what's interesting, one of the interesting things about the film is everybody in that film turns out to be more sleazy and creepy and disgusting than Johnny Depp's character, and he's no saint at all. So it's interesting to watch it develop. And Frank Langella's character, Boris Balkan, who hires him at the end of the movie, ends up with all these slips of paper, and the whole idea of the Ninth Gate is that Frank Langella's character believes that, hey, I can summon the devil. And so there's a great scene that's so over the top you don't believe it, where he's lighting himself on fire in front of Johnny Depp, and he believes he's getting the power of Satan through him. And you're watching him, and he's burning himself, and you see Frank Langella saying, "Oh, I feel the power coursing through my veins." And he's so good at the way he delivers his lines and looks, you believe it. If you're interested in that movie or like the idea of it, go listen to it. But Frank Langella's performance, I thought, wow. Skeletor here at the end, when he got all juiced up, hopped up on the steroids there, when he got the power of both swords put together and he got the helm put on him and everything, I thought, holy crap, this is kind of cool. And it looked really, really good. The special effects, not great by today's standards, certainly better than some of the CGI nonsense we see on these big budget movies that have some really good and really bad parts. But Skeletor, if anybody wants to see practical makeup like we've talked about with Planet of the Apes, just go look at Skeletor and go look at the way he walks, the way that his cape moves, the way he carries the cane, holds the sword. And he's a tall physical guy. I mean, he's not 6'4", 250 like Dolph, but he's 6'2", 6'3". I mean, he's up there. I mean, he's got a physical presence and he knows how to use it. So Skeletor, man, oh man, if you just cut all the scenes with him in it, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful film. Absolutely fantastic.
I'm still saying they should have gotta get James Token as Skeletor.
Well, now, let me ask you this, Doctor, because you might know more about this than I do, or at least you'll know more than I will, because I know nothing. And that's this. I know that, Englitine from I Love Comics, covers, a lot of comic book stuff on his other channels, but with us, he's covering films. And, he's the go-to guy that I've known for 40 years when it comes to what's going on in the comic book industry, graphic novels and such. My understanding is that despite this movie not making its budget, it is a cult film, so it's been somewhat successful in that sense. I guess there's been talk of them trying to bring Masters of the Universe back or anything, or I don't know if they've been in something recently. What do you know?
About 2 years ago, they're talking about getting one of the kids from the Twilight movie. Keelan something. I can't remember what his last name, but they wanted him he got the roles of basically He-Man. They wanted to bring it back, reboot. I'm not sure if they're gonna follow with the 80s thing, or if they're gonna follow more with the reboot or with the more recent comic adaptations they had with Masters of the Universe. Because Masters of the Universe is doing well as a comic book series for people who love the original 80s cartoon. Even though the 80s cartoon is the most made fun of cartoon there is.
Really?
When it comes to the 80s, man. I mean, we've all seen the memes. You've all seen where you got Prince Adam in his pink shirt singing the Cher. But I don't. As far as a reboot though, I don't think it's gonna. Maybe I'll be surprised if they actually do one. And at this day and age, I'm not the one who really wants one. It's because they're playing off nostalgia. Like, oh, that sounds great, but then when you actually get it, it's like, wait, wasn't the first movie not that great? And now you're getting a reboot, and then the reboot could end up being worse. And who knows? I mean, it could be being better. Obviously, I'm not a huge fan of He-Man. I'll admit that. But Master of the Universe had Dolph Lundgren in the role. It's just that they just mishandled the script. They should have had more Skeletor, more of that, and it should not have been on Earth at all. It should never should.
I think that was done just for budgetary reasons, and I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand what you're saying. I don't disagree. Yeah. Huh.
But
yeah, with He-Man, the whole thing to it is it was a kid's cartoon as far as me. It was popular, and a lot of people watched and would talk about it. And it was kind of like what we would talk about 80s wrestling, to use an analogy back in the day, especially then when most of it was still territorial, or for the most part, down here in the South. The heel would get away with stuff. He wouldn't wrestle his matches. He'd find some way to cheat and all this and that. Then the good guy would go through a bunch of nonsense and then beat him at the end. And everybody'd go home happy, and this is before pay-per-views were a monthly thing. And that's how they would do business. And so in the wrestling thing is you would take a feud and you would run this thing out 3 months, 6 months. And if the receipts were going good, you'd find a way to extend it. And the whole idea is for the payoff. And also, what goes in line with that is that when you would have your match and you'd work it, you'd go off to what we would call, your finishing move. Like we always talk about the RKO, and lots of finishers are out there, stunner and this and that. Now, you and I are both fans of AEW and watch it. I call that woke wrestling. That's another conversation for another time. They're just as bad as what I would say WWE has been for about 20 years now, where it's flippity flop. Everybody breaks out of finishes. It doesn't mean anything anymore, so he devalues it. He-Man to me reminds me of that 80s style wrestling in a sense that everything was built up in this film. And I had forgotten about it until, I've got the power, and he raises the sword up, and there's the lightning strike and all that. And I just remember a lot of kids at the time, they're really, really into this. They would talk about the whole show and then be like, yeah, I had the He-Man and the Skeletor and the and then I've got the power. And it was just like a thing. And there was a song, I think in 1990, 91, I've Got the Power. I think Snap was the group. And I think somebody did a remix, house mix of it that has a little bit of the He-Man power part into it, which I'm going to go look for after we talk about it tonight, because, you didn't have to be wildly financially successful for people to like you in the 80s and for people to really dig what you did. And that was always kind of the thing too, is, you're raging against the popular stuff. The really hip people like Rush, and they only talked about with Rush fans. They weren't popular. And then bands that had been around for a long time, like Styx, some people hated because they felt like they were sellouts, and the Metallica did that. And it was just an interesting time, not just for music, but movies, of course. And, Masters of the Universe, I will not be watching again, but I will tell anybody to watch it once if you want a really bad 80s cheese film. That's not going to offend you, but my God, the whole Skeletor performance, spot on, better than a lot of stuff that you didn't see today in 2020.
Well, he said they got the mask wrong. The thing I didn't like is when he got like the god powers, and then he looked ridiculous. I was like, come on, really?
That was a little bit of Conan 2 for people that want to know. I have to admit, my last thought about this film, and then I'll pass it over to you, is that, Dolph Lundgren looked great. He looked fantastic, 80s style hair and all that. If this was the first thing I ever saw him in, you could not convince me that he would be an action star that he would come to be. And a part of that is, while he's physically good looking, he's obviously gotten a lot better. This is being his first role. He's improved a lot. But part of it, again, is, you're not going to have William Shatner in this film as He-Man, although that would be an interesting take. It'd be a spoof. Although I'm sure he thinks he can pull it off, and I would like to see it, back in the day.
We could have got Arnold. I have the power.
Yeah, break
I have the power. Gonna talk fist me now. I
wasn't convinced by Dolph's performance in here at all, but damn it, he's got the look. And honestly, no, as shallow as it sounds, that counts for a lot sometimes in film. So I'm glad to see that Dolph was able to go on and do other things and other movies that we've enjoyed discussing and still be active even today. So what are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts is if you want to redo this movie, bring in actually Dolph Lundgren back. Let him be He-Man again, and let him actually do the script the right way. You know, I want more He-Man. I want more Skeletor, and do it the right way. Don't have it on Earth. You don't need to have it on Earth. Earth was just like a play, like, hey, you as the watcher, the viewer at home, this could be happening in your town next door.
It was just a classic case of, it's like the Angry Birds movie or movies, if there's more than one. They probably came out a couple years too late in terms to really capitalize on the popularity. I may be wrong in saying that, but my impression was, wow, the game was really, really hot as an app for quite some time. I think it was one of the first few breakout ones for a couple years. And so to really hit critical mass, it probably, like I said, I felt needed to probably come out a year or two before. Now, I think it probably made money and all that, but that's definitely the thing with He-Man, is that it was really bombing as far as everything. And so they needed this movie to come out, and it just didn't push them over the edge. However, it goes down in what we consider a canon classic. So it's good because it's got the canon label on it. All right, Doctor, I'd like to thank you for joining me tonight. Can't wait to go over 1976 films on Top 10 Tuesday with Angry Team from Live Comics and yourself and yours truly. So I'd like to thank Jim in chat, everybody listening. Thanks for the retweets. Thanks for all the Twitter people that voted and agreed that Skeletor was a hell of a lot cooler than He-Man, because I knew that's what we were probably going to be talking about the most tonight, too. As always, guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for subscribing. Stay extreme. Good night.
Good night, kids.